Build memory and do the thing.
Yeah.
And they said that they help my friend.
Thank you.
And into the public. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I really enjoy being in this.
So I can drive from here, but I don't know how to switch.
Yeah.
So I will spend my.
I have when I get over to it, I keep it not.
I think the presentation mode is fine, just when you get to it. I'll just off the video.
You don't want to sit up here?
Thank you.
Just wait, just let you go back.
No problem.
Yeah.
Just wanted to give you.
Oh, no, you're great.
All right.
I'm honored to share this with you.
No.
You want them?
I can be loud, but I can also. Right, right.
About talking about.
Oh, yeah.
That was kind of in the period.
Closing that door. It's pretty loud.
Oh, really?
Oh, thank God, there's so many. They're like, what? All right. So they're like,
All right, welcome everyone. Oh, there we go. Now our mic is sounding a little better. Please have a seat and welcome to this afternoon's session, Intersex Bodily Autonomy, Key Issues Facing Intersex Youth and Adults Worldwide. My name is Raquel. I am the Director of HIV Support Services at Rainbow Health, one of your hosts today, and I am honored to be able to introduce to you the presenter for this next session. Sharon Preves is a medical sociologist at Hamline University, where she directs the public health program. Her research on intersex has been published widely, most notably in her book, Intersex and Identity, The Contested Self. She is in the process of writing a second, revised, and expanded edition of this book that includes follow-up interviews with some of the original research participants 25 years later, as well as with second and third generation intersex activists and support group members. She is a member of the Medical Advisory Group for Interact, Advocates for Intersex Youth. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Raquel, for the wonderful introduction. Ash, for all of your help in getting ready for today. Phil, for inviting me to be here as well. How is the sound? Is it okay? Is it good? Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So we'll dive in. So I just want to tell you a little bit first about myself in relationship to the topic. As Raquel said, I'm a medical sociologist. I myself am not intersex. I'm an intersex scholar, ally, and family member. Several dear friends of mine are intersex. My spouse of 25 years is intersex. As Raquel also mentioned, I'm currently on the medical advisory group of Interact, Advocates for Intersex Youth. I also was on the medical advisory board of the Intersex Society of North America. Some of you may have heard of ISNA. It closed shop in 2008, but I was involved with them for many, many years. So I'd like to start off any talk about intersex. First, let me ask, how many of you feel like you know something about intersex? Yay, okay, that helps me a lot. How many of you feel like you don't really? Great, okay. So I just kind of want to get everybody a little bit on the same page. How many of you know someone who has intersex traits, yourself or otherwise? Fantastic. Okay, just kind of get a sense of who's in the room. So this is a quote from historian Alice Dreger. This is actually her dissertation title. But I think it gives a nice grounding with respect to thinking about bodies that provide challenges socially. In any human culture, a body is never a body unto itself, and bodies that openly challenge significant boundaries are particularly prone to being caught in struggles over those boundaries. Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. So what we're talking about here is, diversity of bodies. There's all kinds of diversity of bodies, including people who are assigned female or assigned male at birth without any consideration of being intersex. There's so much variation in, for example, external genitalia, like at the newborn stage, in childhood, in adulthood. So for people who don't know a whole lot about intersex, we'll do just a little brief Intersex 101. What we're talking about is anatomy, not just genitalia, external genitalia, but anatomy that doesn't neatly conform to binary sex traits. And so could be external genitalia, could be chromosomes that aren't XX or XY, they might be XO, double XY, triple XY. They could be mosaic, meaning that some cells in the body are XX, others are XY. Lots of variety there. They could be with respect to testes or ovaries or some combinations of gonadal tissue, could be related to hormones, all kinds of things. So there are lots of different characteristics that make up our sex traits. We tend to focus so heavily on genitalia, especially at birth. What's very interesting and problematic about this, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, it's such a small part of the body, right? Such a small part of the body, and so much of a person's existence and life is based on that decision. And the question is, what is it? It's a person. It's a baby, right? What is it? It's a baby. So it's really kind of like, the question is really like, what species are we talking?
Yep.
So being able to fit into this binary, in a sense, connotes personhood. And the inability to do so creates this whole social emergency. The vast majority of people who have intersex traits, newborns included, don't have any kind of physiological problem, but are most often born full term, breathing well, like everything's working great, APGAR score is fantastic, whisked off to the neonatal ICU because of maybe if there is some sort of visible confusion that is presented for the medical personnel around the external genitalia, then it's sort of like, oh my gosh, we have to go to the NICU. What does that do to a family? With respect to all of the people waiting online, I'm in labor, we're in labor, we're going, right? And, there's no announcement of the birth. The family isn't able to bring in siblings, isn't able to bring in grandparents, extended family, friends to greet and celebrate this new member of the community. And so what does that do to all of these lives going forward, please?
Yeah, just a quick question, to clarify that. Oh, okay.
Sure.
I have a quick question about, do they do that, the medical practitioners, if they see a visible confusion of genitalia, do they take these infants to the NICU without parental consent?
Oh,
Or are they saying to the parents something's wrong?
Yes.
They won't tell them your child is, they won't tell them what it is, or will they say just something's wrong and then they whisk this child away and make those decisions without, okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, so a lot of nodding there. The way this goes, and of course, this isn't monolithic with respect to healthcare practitioners. But the way this usually goes is we need to run some tests. We need to run some tests. We're not sure what sex your baby is, so we're going to find out. And so what ends up happening is that we get pushed into the binary. That sort of like intersex really doesn't exist. Like, oh, we need to run some tests, maybe some genetic tests. We'll look at hormones. Some of the testing is, I would equate with child abuse with respect to sexual abuse, with respect to testing of the structure that either becomes clitoris or penis that is labeled that way, the phallic structure, the genital tubercle. Doing some stimulation of that to see how erect it can get, like how long it can get. Because the sex assignment decision-making is usually based on sort of like penis or no penis. That is, but how we do sex assignment, right? We're not like carefully exploring structures and looking for labia and vagina and all of that. It's just like, is there a penis or not? And so most of the children born with visible intersex variation are surgically then sexed female with respect to clitoral reduction. So regardless of chromosomes, gonads, etc. It's a lot to take in here. We're only on slide 2. I gotta keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
You bet. 1.7% of the population might not seem like a lot. It is roughly the same frequency as people born with red hair. All of us know someone who's intersexed. All of us who has intersex traits. All of us know someone who has red hair. Absolutely. So this is really young, this medicalization paradigm that we have. It got going in the 1950s by a psychologist named John Money at Johns Hopkins University. And the goal is really benevolent. It's to preclude stigma. Oh my gosh, how are these kids going to fit in the locker room? What are they going to do with respect to romantic partners, sexual partners? So there's this whole heteronormativity that is there in the NICU, like looking at this child. Oh my gosh, how are they going to fit in? Who are they going to have sex with? They're 5 minutes old, right? But how do we help them fit in? And is this genital tubercle, this phallic structure, going to be large enough to penetrate a vagina or not? So that's a big part of what is guiding these sex assignment decisions. And the goal, again, is really benevolent. Let's prevent stigma by helping them track in a heteronormative way successfully by erasing the difference, changing their bodies if there is a visible difference. The model also involves secrecy and lack of information. So let's intervene really early, really young, and not tell the child about it. Again, how is this impacting families? So the family then is being pressured, the parents, the guardians, to make decisions about, giving consent to do permanent, vaginoplasty, clitoral reduction on their newborn. It usually happens. I've heard of testes being removed, abdominal testes being removed as young as 3 months. Sometimes surgeries wait until 1, 3 years old. But the idea is to intervene surgically as young as possible to prevent, so that there can be this sort of this heterosexual matrix, this gender identity that will then develop in line with the surgical sex that was assigned at birth. And then there will be a heterosexual identity that aligns as well. So lots and lots, you can obviously see the overlaps with trans issues for sure. Trans youth and adults fighting for access to some of these surgical procedures and to the hormonal care that is forced upon intersex children and youth. And by the way, removal of gonads of testes in childhood will then result in a life of dependence on external hormones for bone health, for all kinds of things. I know plenty of intersex, relatively young adults in their 30s who have osteoporosis because their abdominal testes were removed for a year old. So, individualizing a social problem. If there's concern about what's going to happen in the locker room for this young person as they grow, well, why don't we change the locker room, the culture of the locker room, rather than surgically altering, sewing this cultural problem into a child's body and into the fabric of the family. And with respect to what the focus has been for years, so 1950s, going forward, and I got involved in this work in 1993, so it's been 30 years now. The focus was really about surgical success, and there hadn't been any evaluation of quality of life outcomes. So how did this go? The goal was to preclude stigma. Okay, how did it work? Like, how are people doing? How are people faring as adults with this? And that's how I got involved in this work. A medical ethicist by the name of Kenneth Kipnis uses something he calls the thank you test as a sort of a measure of ethical evaluation. If patients, prior patients, former patients are saying, thank you so much for intervening, thank you for this help, then you know that it is an ethical intervention. So this is the year 2000. The American Academy of Pediatrics issued this position statement in response to a protest by the Intersex Society of North America. The birth of a child with ambiguous genitalia constitutes a social emergency. This is a medical organization. Abnormal appearance can be corrected and the child raised as a boy or a girl as appropriate. Parents should be encouraged not to name the child or register the birth, if possible, until the sex of rearing is established. Infants raised as girls will usually require clitoral reduction, which, with current techniques, will not only result in a normal-looking vulva, but preserve a functional clitoris. These children's diagnosis and prompt treatment require urgent medical attention. I know.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So this is 2000. And this was, as I said, in response to protest by the Intersex Society of North America. This was October 26th, 1993. The reason I know the date is because it is, this is Intersex Awareness Day, was established in commemoration of this event. It was a protest in Boston outside of the American Academy of Pediatrics annual meeting. And they wanted time. They wanted to speak at the convention. They showed up and said, we want to be heard. And we're told our conference is full, you haven't registered, you're not members. And so they protested. And part of what they were saying was, well, what is your formal position on intersex, births, on responses to intersex variations of sex characteristics? And they're like, well, we don't have one. They're like, well, we would like to know what it is. So this is how the first position statement came up. Roughly 45 years after these interventions started. There is, of course, widespread critique of this medicalization. So lots of folks, activists, artists, scholars have talked about the long-term psychosocial, sexual, and physical harm. And it's hard to, I think, tease apart the psychosexual and physical harm, the psychosocial and physical harm, because one, the body keeps the score with respect to that trauma living in the body. And, the prior slide about preserving functional clitoris, there's a lot of nerve damage, there's scar tissue, there's all kinds of stuff, right? One of the things that is really common for young people with intersex traits who are assigned female at birth is that they undergo vaginoplasty very young, oftentimes with skin grafts that are happening that might be from part of their colon or other things. And so they end up with all kinds of problems, if you can imagine. One of the people I spoke with, they said, for my research, they talked about their freshman year of college during winter break having a vaginoplasty. Like, what did you do over your break? Well, I had a vaginoplasty. And that the vagina they were left with leaked fecal matter and had no sensation. They were like, they could have put a vagina in my arm. Like, there's no sensation. And what they had before, this was at the age of 19, was really the ability to respond sexually and to enjoy their bodies. So it's hard to know, like, age of consent. This person is over 18, right? And is consenting to surgery. Typically vaginoplasty, or if a child has, there are over 40 different types of intersex variations in terms of the different diagnostic labels ascribed to them. Oftentimes, people have maybe a vaginal structure that is deemed small, maybe short, tight, and so they are given dilators, which are basically, many of you are familiar with dilators, right? Yes. Medically prescribed dildos, right? But for a parent needing to dilate their child to increasing degrees, and the child is fighting it. Oh, yeah, it's really difficult, right? For a child needing to dilate themselves, 12, 13 years old, that gets really difficult. Talk to a number of people who, again, college, right? Dorm room, roommate, they're trying to dilate like in the closet or something, between classes. So because their clinician has stressed the importance of being able to be penetrated by a penis for their husband from an imaginary person. Yes, please.
So,
Do you want a microphone?
no, I think I'm good.
Okay.
So my question with that is do they always go for full depth vaginoplasty or minimal depth or?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
What they go for is usually based on ability to be penetrated by
Okay.
an
so then
imaginary
full depth.
phallus.
It's full depth.
Yeah. See, I'm like, yeah, okay, good. I'm learning. This is good. I want to watch this one. We've got it pulled up.
Oh.
Yep. It's already, it's right. Nope, if you move this over. Yep. This one? If we can make it big. Maybe if we're doing the presentation mode. Escape that. There we go. Perfect. What? Jeez. Mhm.
Mhm. Yes. Mhm. Yep. Mhm. Mhm. Mm.
Mm. I know that's a lot to take in. That is from, um, so that is from a 2017 report that was done, commissioned by Interact advocates for Interact advocates for Intersex Youth, conducted by the Human Rights Watch. And the activist that you saw there, Pigeon Pagonis, fabulous person. I just hosted them in my my sociology of gender class at Hamline. And they live in Chicago and have just published a memoir, which we read as a class. It is so beautiful. It's called Nobody Should Know. It was published in August. Nobody Should Know, Pigeon Pagonis. And you might have seen some of their beautiful artwork, Too Cute to Be Binary. You can buy this on their Etsy shop. And you might have seen also Your Gender is Beautiful, and the little card was stay calm and let the baby decide.
Yes.
So Pigeon's work. Pagonis, Pagonis, Pigeon Pagonis. Yeah, please.
I think it's really tricky because a lot of the arguments against medical intervention for intersex people are a lot of the same arguments that that let's say like nerves use, or just
Absolutely.
very against like children. I'm a kind of woman, I know in my experience, if I could go back in time when I was like 12, 13 and go through female puberty, my life would be better across the board.
Absolutely.
But I think my question for you is, how do we delegate issues for trans people, for intersex people? And how do we get to a point where we don't intervene in the child's life and they're able to make decisions as an adult, but also like they still have all of their options at their disposal. They are able to consent to the right thing for them. Like, for example, if I were to have gone on blockers, right?
Right.
Then at 18, yeah, I can decide to go through female food care. I guess that's my question.
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, and I think that this is where we really are with respect to these two issues in the massive legislative efforts to have access to gender affirming care. There is in most of these bills an explicit exception clause written in, except in cases of it's written as children with disorders of sex development, which is how intersex is oftentimes referred to in medicalese, medical literature. So I think part of it is really collaboration between people who work on intersex stuff and people who work on trans stuff, and really looking at this, framing this as a human rights issue around bodily autonomy with respect to empowering youth to as people. It's putting a pause on it's really getting the it's demedicalizing in some ways, to just, but with trans youth and gender expansive youth, it's about getting access to that medical care. So it's so complex what you're asking about, but it's really about infusing youth with efficacy and framing all of these issues as a right to bodily autonomy, and somehow getting that into our policies, into our medical education, for God's sake, and into our medical practice. So it's something we have a long way to go on. I don't have a quick and easy answer. Maybe somebody else does.
I certainly don't. Alright, I was just curious, maybe you're gonna talk about it, but did the American Academy of Pediatrics positional statement change? Is it better now?
In 2006, there was something called a consensus statement, which wasn't a consensus at all, that was published that talked about the need to perhaps have multidisciplinary teams be involved, not just endocrinologists and urologists, but maybe we want to include social workers or therapists, psychologists, or other folks who might tend to family needs, might tend to some of the psychosocial needs. And like, hey, we probably want to do some follow-up studies of our own to see how is this working out. Not much happened with that. I've talked to it in 2016, there was a follow-up basically saying, how did the consensus statement do? And part of the consensus statement was renaming intersex disorders of sex development, or DSD, which you might have seen, you might have encountered somewhere, which of course had a lot of backlash, including activists publishing things and protesting saying, I am not a disorder, right? And what's really interesting is, right, like at the same time that was happening, that intersex was being renamed a disorder, trans, in the DSM went from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria. So it's like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So your question, I just went on.
Oh, it's okay, I was just asking if that's a positional.
Oh, this is the
statement.
statement. So sort of symbolically, there isn't a new American Academy of Pediatrics statement. It's sort of been relegated to these consensus statements. And it's very much about involving multidisciplinary teams is really what they've gone to. In 30 years of doing this work, there has been very little change in both medical education and medical practice. There are a handful of clinicians who are working internally for change, but this is still the practice that's happening, not just here in this country, but really very much worldwide. Yeah. Quick follow-up, and then should I? Please.
Well, I'm gonna apologize in advance. I have a lot of emotion around this subject.
Of course.
And
Incredibly emotional. No apology necessary.
there we go.
Welcome.
And I apologize. This is gonna be a little bit of pushback. And
Sure.
I'm hoping that it works well. You've made a lot of statements discussing about the harm. The harm is real. The harm is there. That harm is still there for me as a trans person as well. Every single one of the surgeries, every single one of the hormone care stuff, those things are real and those are tied into it. With that said, when you're looking at intersex issues and trans issues, the two circles almost completely overlap because it comes down to body autonomy, body control, body function in many ways. But because it's easier for us to legislate harm when we talk about trans issues by preventing surgery, we're creating this massive amount of harm, right? Because when we talk about intersex, we then talk about the massive amount of harm from the medical side, right? By doing those, we've now separated the two camps when they actually sit over each other
They sure
in an
do.
immense amount of degree. Because we've done that, I can't challenge most of my surgeons and doctors when they do harm to me, because there's levels of accuracy, there's all sorts of stuff that happens. So I have an immense amount of friends who've gone through vaginoplasties that most of them have had a great success. Some have had nightmarish
Oh, of course.
success, and they can't push back on the doctors because we've done this two separate componentry. When they do, they are told to shut up because they're harming the community. And then on the opposite side, they're giving ammunition to the other areas. So when you're using your language, the language comes across because it is. They're both the same issue in many ways. How can we properly relate those two together in the language, specifically when we talk about it from a legal perspective, but also more importantly in the social aspect? Because when we talk about moving change around community, it isn't about what we do from a legal side, it's much more on what we do from the social side. So how can we take, because I heard it in your language, I heard it in the room over there and I heard it over here. I heard you all divide the two things up like this. How do we overlay them?
And just for, thank you very much for that. Just for my clarification, when you're talking about the two things lining up, you're talking about the intersex and the trans, yes? Okay. Yeah, so.
A little bit, when you're dealing with a lot of these aspects. So I have trans friends who came out as trans, transitioned, only to find out that they would have a interesting behavior with their hormones.
Sure.
And found out later, one of them was, one fathered a child and found out that they were XX.
Sure, yep,
And it was after they transitioned.
sure, yeah. And many people who have intersex traits are also trans.
Correct.
And they find out, I've talked to people who found out they were intersex when they were in their sixties.
Yep.
Right, I just interviewed someone who was in his eighties who went through a transition and went, through all of the sort of trans route for that. And then as a part of the testing, hormone testing, found out, wow, you actually have an intersex variation. And so there is so much overlap. There needs to be a whole lot of education around that. Also, many intersex adults who don't align their gender with what was assigned in terms of sex assigned at birth, they transition. So there are so many ways it's aligned. It's incredibly complicated. There needs to just be a whole lot of education around that. I want to make sure that I have an opportunity to kind of push forward a little bit. I would
I love it, keep going.
love to engage further in conversation. Yeah, it's really complex. These issues that both of you have raised, very complex and incredibly important. Sometimes the conflation of them does harm.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes the lack of looking at the overlap does harm. It's so complicated. Thank you. So intersex social movement, are we stopping at, we have 10 minutes, is that right? Yes. Okay, great. So I just want to give you some hopeful, exciting things, right? So we've heard about people being acted upon, about people as agentic actors. So this is the intersex social movement began in 1993. It was formed, it was started actually by a person named Beau Laurent, who at that time was going by the pseudonym Cheryl Chase. Some of you might have heard of her. She used the pseudonym Cheryl Chase because she sort of wanted to keep her identity private, but then her intersex activism took over so much, she sort of became Cheryl for a while, and now she's Bo again. She launched the Intersex Society of North America in 1993 by publishing a letter to the editor in response to a fabulous article. This is how I got interested in this topic. I was a graduate student, 1993, in a class about gender and science, and we read this article by biologist Ann Foster Sterling called The Five Sexes. Some of you know it, Why Male and Female Aren't Enough. And I was like, oh, this is so interesting. It was talking about hermaphroditism and art and history and mythology, all of this stuff. Bo wrote, and this was published in the journal Science. The Sciences. Science is very different tier. The Sciences. Bo wrote, as Cheryl Chase, wrote a letter to the editor in response saying, read this article, and had been looking, by the way, for other people with intersex variations for years. And this is very beginning of the internet. Keep this in mind technology-wise, right? So not able to find folks, but scouring everything. So finds a physical journal and responds to it, right? And says, we're not just about mythology and art and history. We actually exist today. We've formed this organization. If you want to come and join us, if you want more information, contact us at, Intersex Society of North America, P.O. Box, blah, 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 Cheryl Chase, founder and executive director. There was no organization when she published that letter. That's how it was formed. And it really started a huge worldwide social movement. This is the first newsletter, Hermaphrodites with Attitude. It became Attitude. The first one was Attitudes. Here we have, it's really powerful. We've got Rudolph and Cheryl, actually, Bo, hand-colored each of those little red noses. So we have figure 1A on the left. Note disfiguring hypertrophy of nose. Rudolph, who's looking really happy with that large nose, right? I have not talked to people who are unhappy with their large clitorises. And B, above, post-surgical aspect, an excellent cosmetic result was achieved. And Rudolph is devastated. So you can see how effective their activism was. And people found each other by snail mailing these newsletters to one another. It was just phenomenal. I'm just going to cruise through a few slides here because I want to show you one clip of something that I want you to go and watch. Intersex Awareness Day just happened 2 days ago. So a couple of things you can do. You can buy Pigeon Pagonis's book. You can buy a book by Alicia Roth Weigel, who you'll see in just a moment. Don't worry about the spelling of her name. Just look up this title, Inverse Cowgirl. Yeah, good title.
Yeah.
Inverse Cowgirl. She's been getting a lot of buzz. Jonathan Van Ness has been doing lots of PR with her. So that was just published this month. Another memoir. So Interconnect is the largest support group for people with intersex variations in the world. Interact Advocates for Youth is really the legal arm in terms of intersex activism. They are working with people in various states to try to enact legislation to ban non-consensual surgeries. On Intersex Youth, we have an activist locally here that I'm working with who's working with our queer caucus to try and enact a legislation at the state level. This is just getting off the ground, hopefully for this session. Yes, they are coming to my class. They work with tigers. Some of you might know tigers. Yeah. So Lee and Ty from Tigers are coming to class next week. Lee Finke is coming in a couple of weeks to talk about things related to sort of transgender expansive issues, and of course, the trans refuge bill. Here we have Pigeon, as well as Saifa Wall, and I don't know who the other person is. They founded the Intersex Justice Project in 2017. This is that picnic at the American Academy of Pediatrics, where intersex activists were partnering with trans activists, and you might see the very tall figure in the sweatshirt there. That's Ricky Ann Wilkins from Transsexual Menace, who was partnering with Beau Laurent about how to make media moments and doing mentoring around activism. Just showing you some international activism. This was a project where people would, the interface project, No Body is Shameful. This is international voices. People, you can click on these videos and hear their stories. International groups of people getting together. This is in Malta in 2013. Denver 2015. So you can just see this kind of growing. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights made a declaration about these surgeries being human rights violation in 2015. Protests outside of hospitals. Intersex Awareness Day in Brussels. So you can just kind of see this movement growing. So there has been action. You can see these different associations, medical, legal, otherwise making calls for change, including some hospitals in the US since 2020 have banned surgical moratoriums on some surgeries. Chicago Lurie, Boston Children's, and then all hospitals in the New York City public hospital system, which is the largest public hospital system in the US. So I want to end with, on Intersex Awareness Day, 2 days ago, the House of Representatives put in this resolution, like, hey, we recognize Intersex Awareness Day, and all it stands for with respect to potentially banning surgeries. So what is a resolution? Is it hard? Is it symbolic? Yeah, great. I want to end with this clip, and it's pulled up. This is a film, the first feature-length mainstream film that you can stream it for free on Peacock. You can buy it on Amazon. Watch it. That's Alicia Rothweigel. Okay. John Money. Thank you so much. I'm here to answer questions. Love to talk with you. Thank you for being here.